I read your book, of course, and I also saw some videos of you. And in your book, you begin with some definitions of fascia. Mm-hmm. And I didn't see your own definition of fascia. And I'm interested, what would you give as a definition of fascia?
Well, my definition is going to stay with the science definition, because one of my missions here is to get fascia regarded seriously, and particularly for me in medical circles. And I do work with a medical center here in Pittsburgh. So my definition is, the simplest way I can put it is that it is both a tissue and it's a system. So it is a predominantly collagen-based tissue that surrounds, interpenetrates the muscles, the organs, the nerves, and the bones. It has a fluid component, the most important one of which is hyaluronan, and it forms within the body a system of support and movement that interacts with many bodily parts and bodily systems, because we're not a discrete, the cell model of medicine, which we still live under, has this idea that we're made of these little parts, and you put enough of these little parts together and you get a whole. Mm-hmm. And to me, we're a very complex whole that we can divide into parts, which makes it easier to talk about, and that's useful, but we should never mistake the parts for the whole, and vice versa. So I see fascia as being a tissue and an interconnected system that is collagen-based with a fluid component, the most important of which is hyaluronan.
Hyaluronan, yeah. It took me a while to learn that word in Dutch. And
it's a hard word to say. It's easier to say hyaluronic acid, but it's not an acid.
I just saw a commercial yesterday of Nivea. They also have for your skin now something with hyaluronic acid in it.
Yes, and I was talking to, who was I talking to? But I was talking to one of my colleagues, and that's not going to do it. So it's a nice marketing tool, but it's not going to do it. And I asked Antonio Stecco years ago, what about hyaluronic supplements? He's like, no. So I'm sure he feels the same way about Nivea. Sorry, Nivea, you're not going to be a sponsor on this podcast.
Hey, and how did you get fascinated by fascia?
Okay, origin story. So somewhere I started out as a massage therapist. And before that, I started out as somebody who just had good palpation skills. If somebody said, "Oh, my neck's hurting," I would just instinctively go, "Oh, here, let me," and I could feel and differentiate things under the skin in a way that people seem to like and would ask me to replicate. So as often, sometimes the things that come naturally to us, we don't always recognize for being what they are. So I grew up in a working class town, steel mill oriented town. And when you said the word massage, it meant something very specific that had to do with sex. And there was a particular place downtown where you went for massages and massage parlors. So the idea that you could put your hand on somebody and make a positive difference in a medical or wellness way was not something that came naturally to me. But I was working in television and radio in Florida in the 1980s. And I'm from Pennsylvania. I took the geographic here and went to Florida. And they had massage therapy down there, which is something I had never heard of. And they actually had a state massage therapy association since 1951. So I went, oh, this is like a legit thing. Yeah. So after working in television, worked at a funeral home for a while, advertising. I did a number of different things in my 20s, like many of us do. I thought, wow, the one thing that's consistent is this putting my hands on people and doing this massage thing. Maybe I should go learn more about that. So I moved back home to Pittsburgh and I went to the local community college. So flash forward 10 years later, and I met and I had heard of fascia. I took a clinical course that had a fascial component to it. And I was kind of fast. I thought, well, this is interesting, but it didn't really get my imagination going. Mm-hmm. But after about 10 years of being what I think was a pretty good clinical massage therapist, I just found myself hitting the walls of what I didn't know. So I knew that I could say this person came in with low back pain, and okay, I'm kind of good at helping with that. But why did this person get better in 7 visits? This person, it took 17 visits, and this person never got better at all. So there's something that I'm missing here. And quite frankly, I started developing some of my own aches and pains. I worked out at 2 locations. Then one of them was not a good ergonomic situation. So I didn't have a lot of room to really pull back from the table and use proper body mechanics. So I was like this a lot, standing up and pushing down. And then a Heller worker, which is an offshoot of Rolfing Structural Integration, moved into one of the towns where I had my practice. And I thought, wow, I want to go see what this person is about and trade with them. And the moment that she started treating me, it was just in my head. It was like, this is exactly what my body needs. Wow. This is what I think I need to not think. It's like, this is what I need to learn because this is what I want to be doing. And sometimes I think I'm actually doing it, which sounds a little arrogant, but fascial touch has a distinct quality that's different from, say, effleurage, petrissage, trigger point therapy. And so sometimes my hands would just find that. And it was always a good experience when they did, but I didn't know that I was doing something. It felt different, but I didn't really understand it. So it's like, I need to fix myself, and then I need to go learn this. Cool. And find out as much as I possibly can. So that was around 1999, 2000. That I made the connection, but it took me to about 2002 to find the right training. And then once I jumped into the deep end of the pool, there was no going back for me.
Oh, cool. Relatable. Yeah, I think a lot of therapists already worked on the fascia before even knowing it existed.
Well, yeah, your hands find something interesting and you remodel the clay, if you will, or however you want to think about it. They get a positive response and you just start developing that skill in your hands.
Yeah. Well, what also fascinates me about fascia is that, how do you say that? It's not that the fabric feels different, but you also get different information back into your hands.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Yeah. What kind of different information do you get back into your hands? What did you notice was the difference?
Well, for me, always fascia feels very, very, sounds stupid maybe, but very connective.
Yeah.
It feels like fascia, when I touch fascia, it doesn't stop where our bodies stop. It's like
I don't think that sounds stupid at all. I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like you can feel beyond where you're touching.
Yeah.
When you're engaging the fascia.
Yeah.
And that's great because then that gives you information sometimes about what to do next or where to do next.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I read this article about blurring. They call it blurring. I don't know if that's the English word. It's an English word, but
okay.
They are testing now people with virtual reality glasses on, so they don't know what their body is anymore and what the body of the other person is. And that also made me think about fascia. It's very interesting, and it's the article is called that our self is not so solid anymore. It's a fake concept. So we can put on a VR brill, and after 2 minutes, we already think we have another body or something.
Mm-hmm. So it's called blurring.
Yeah, blurring.
I'm gonna have my research person look that up for me. Oh, seriously? No, I was having a talk with another researcher, Neil. I'm not a researcher. I just write about it. Neil Thies, or Theise is known in Germany, and we were talking about that. It's a matter of scale. We have this body, but if you go down to the cellular scale, there's no body.
Yeah.
It's all these cells. And if you go deep into the cell, it's all atoms and there's no cell. So it all depends on the scale, reality depends on the scale that we're observing and what we're looking at and how we're coming across it. So you're not wrong.
No, I know. But I heard it now first on air, telling you about it. So,
good.
No.
I want this to be an affirmative experience for you, Stefan.
Okay, thank you. I need that.
We all do.
My fascination for fascia is also because for me it's a very holistic approach. It's also it put together for me the body and also the rest of a person.
Mm-hmm.
How's that for you?
I would say working with fascia definitely gives me the opportunity to treat the whole person in a more thorough way than I was able to previously. So I was fortunate in my early training. I had a wonderful teacher by the name of Earl Timberlake. There's a name for you. And he taught a lot of the Travell-Simons trigger points. But he also, more than the referral pattern, he taught how the referral pattern hooked up to different parts of the body. So I actually had 2 color-coded charts in my room. And some of the trigger points and their immediate referral pattern, some of them were in green, some of them were in purple, some of them were in red, some of them were in blue. But what it did was it showed you a system where if you had one of the purple trigger points, you might have some of the other purple trigger points. If you have the green trigger points, you might have some of the other green trigger points in the chart. So what would happen is I would be doing what I called clinical massage therapy. And if somebody had that trigger point, I'd go, I wonder if they have this one over here. Ah, they do. I wonder if they have that one over there. So I started actually treating based on these color charts. Not exclusively, not entirely, but it just was a good exploration for me. And I found that more often than not, that was often the case. And be like, wow, how did you know to go there? You're amazing. I'm like, no, I can just read a map. It's not that hard. So that idea, that interconnected idea, made intuitive sense to me. It bore itself out clinically, anatomically, pathologically. At the time, I can't pretend that I understood it. So when I discovered the fascia and specifically the anatomy trains model, it was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It was a big learning curve for me, but the core concept felt like home to me.
Yeah.
So that was what made it easier for me to make that leap. And what I saw was a much better way to treat the body as a whole, as opposed to I had all these maps, but now I can actually put the maps together and create a globe, or in this case, the whole person.
Wow. Yeah. The globe. Yeah. Interesting. I don't know. But I'm starting to think about, I think you call them fractals in English.
Yes.
And as it pops up because you talk about globe, and I was just went to my head like, it's always so fascinating that we can zoom in onto our body and find these pictures of like deltas that we can zoom out and find on the earth too. It's like the same building stones. That's also
There's a really good movie. I shouldn't say movie. It's a short film from the 1970s called Cosmic Zoom. And if you go to YouTube and type in Cosmic Zoom, you'll find it. And it's pre-digital, boys and girls, but that doesn't make it bad. And what they do is they start with somebody having a picnic in Central Park in New York City, and they start zooming out. And then you see the whole park, and then you see the whole city, and then you see the New York State and the United States. And eventually you get out beyond the globe and you go all the way out to the outer boundaries of the universe. And then they speed it up and go all the way back down. And then they go inside the person having the picnic all the way down to the cellular level. And it's no different.
Yeah. Amazing.
So check out Cosmic Zoom.
Yeah, well.
Not now, because you're listening to this podcast, everybody. But when the podcast is done, check out Cosmic Zoom on YouTube.
We'll put a link in the bio. Yeah. what I also liked about your book is that you talk about, I think the English word is also glia. Is it glia?
Glia, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for me, that I thought I read in your writing that you were like surprised how glia is also like fascia, but then like in the brain. Like to me, it felt like fascia is also almost like sort of how do you call it? A symptom. No, that's the wrong word, but you can have it in tissue. You can have it in glia, and I also think you can have it in a energetic way or something.
Okay.
Did I read that correctly, or do I make sense?
No. In sometimes language, you speak English way better than I speak Dutch, so I'm grateful for that. So we can work our way through this. To take a step back from that, so I can follow you down this path. So early on in my training, I was either told or I got the incorrect impression. So I'm willing to own that the glia was the fascia of the brain. And I thought, well, that explains everything. And so I kind of always made a point of, if I found a book on glia, I got it, I read it. And I saw a lot of similarities. Now, it's not the fascia of the brain, but I was actually asked to do a lecture on it, and by Robert Schleip for the fascia research summer school one year, and I was talking about fascia and the mind-body connection in glia, and he thought that sounded really interesting. He said, but you do know, glia is not fascia. And I thought, well, I know that now. Not my best moment ever, but I appreciated him correcting me. But he thought there was a good idea there, so I thought, okay, if he thinks that I'm onto something here, then I'm gonna knuckle down and do it, because I didn't want my beautiful idea to be ruined by an unfortunate truth. So it just made me work harder to figure out what it was. And what I discovered was that the glia system, the glia outnumber the neurons in your brain 9-1. So rather like this idea that we have in the musculoskeletal body, that the muscles do everything and the fascia is just this passive wrapping that protects you from stretching too far or getting compressed too much. That was kind of what glia did for the brain, and they cleaned up the metabolic waste. And so they were, by and large, they were ignored. The neurons were larger to see under the microscope. They were bigger. There were less of them, but they're bigger, so they must be more important. That's not necessarily the case. The glia, it was discovered around the turn of the last century that the glia do communicate to each other via calcium waves, which is a very, I don't want to say primitive form of communication, but that's what goes on in the paramecium of the cell. In the cilia of the paramecium. So paramecium is a single-celled organism. It has these little hair-like things called cilia, and that's how they float around. And if they hit a barrier that they can't get through, those cilia move and they float away. But what's actually going on inside the paramecium is there's a calcium wave aspect to that happens, that engages that process, that we see it is, oh, those little hairs feel it and they move away. And that's true up to a point. So these cells, these glia outnumbering the neurons 9-1, they communicate to other glia via calcium waves, not through electrical communication. And when you think about the brain, you think about electricity. These chemical messages can be very far-reaching and actually can affect brain function. It can affect the release of ATP, speaking of the muscles. Again, it can actually affect changes in respiration. So it can affect which neurons talk to other neurons. So there is a cooperative system going on there between the glia and between the neurons. And it's not this idea that we have of this hierarchical top-down structure where the neurons are in charge of everything and everything else just serves the neurons. I'm not sure that's an accurate model anymore. And the other thing I find fascinating about glia, again, like fascia, they were They were ignored, for a long, long time. They form this complex system within the brain that alters the brain function, just the way the fascia creates a complex system that can alter muscle and other functions. And the thing that I find fascinating is the further up you go on the evolutionary ladder, the more glia you have. So humans have a much higher glia to neuron ratio than a mouse does.
Oh, really? Wow.
Dogs are somewhere in between. So I find it interesting that the more, and I don't know how many dolphins have, but I'd like to know because they've got some pretty amazing brains. Yeah. But the more sophisticated the brain, the more glia exist in relationship to the number of neurons in the brain. So, there is something there. And there's even this crazy idea that perhaps, and this is based on one instance that we know of, so you can't really say that that's true everywhere, but there were places in Einstein's brain that had a higher ratio of glia than normal. So instead of 9-1, it was like 21-1. And these were in areas of the brain that are attributed to spatial thinking, visualization, areas that you would expect Einstein's brain to be a little bit different than the average brain to have. So the question that speaks to me, but I'm not aware of anybody investigating it. I'm not sure how they would until you're dead. But is it there because, like fascia, those were parts of his brain that he used a lot?
Yeah.
So just like the way you use your body affects how your fascia grows, does the way you use your brain affect how your glia multiply and respond? I have no idea.
Yeah.
But these are the questions that keep me up at night and keep me reading research.
Of course. I can totally imagine that. Because that sounds like glia is the one of the fabrics of consciousness.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, absolutely. I think that could be. I may steal that, but I'll give you credit for it, Stefan.
Go ahead. I'm also going to talk to Nivea about it. Maybe they can.
Okay.
Hey,
I'm. Let's get some corporate synergy going.
Maybe they can make
I got to fund my retirement somehow.
Hey, and that makes me think about I once read why monkeys are much stronger than, or apes are much stronger than humans. And it's because they have more gray matter. And now I'm thinking they also probably, we use that space up. Do you know, is that gray matter? Is that English?
Yes, it is. It is. I'm not familiar with this idea. Keep going.
Okay, well monkeys, we're pretty similar anatomy, only apes are much stronger.
Yes.
And that's because they have more gray matter, and our fabrics are much more neuroreceptors and
the white matter.
Like that. Yeah.
So how does that translate to physical strength? Do you know?
No, don't know.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know. My idea is that gray matter gives more strength, and that doesn't that doesn't take away the intelligence or the intelligent use of muscles, or the more proprioceptive or interoceptive use of it. I don't know.
Okay, so they may have more. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it gives them more physical strength, but they don't have the kind of physical refinement.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have a gorilla Usain Bolt or.
Using what?
Sorry, Usain Bolt. He's incredibly fast, the runner. Or I'm thinking of somebody that requires a little more manual dexterity. I was talking to somebody who knew a researcher who could, and I didn't know there was such a thing. It's called a laser tweezer.
Laser tweezer.
So it's a pair of tweezers that's made with a laser, and he could manipulate the laser tweezer so fine that he could put a single stem cell in a particular organ on a mouse.
Wow.
So maybe that's the kind of physical refinement that our brains give us that the monkey brain is not.
No. And maybe that's why Einstein was human and not.
Was he human? Do we know that for a fact?
Well, you saw his brain.
Yeah, Yeah, I didn't see his brain. I just wrote about it.
Oh, you wrote about it. So you started talking about evolution, and don't go there when you talk to me, because that's my most fascinating subject.
Okay.
Just one question about it then.
Sure.
The PolyFagot theory, have you caught up to that, and how does that relate?
You know, I got Stephen Porges's book here, and I have one of the other ones. There is definitely something to the PolyFagot theory. I have not explored it in depth, but I will tell you this, from my understanding of it, it has changed the way I practice, in that if somebody comes into me in a very hypertoned state, okay, so you're coming to me for low back pain, you're coming to me for a frozen shoulder, this person just wants to go through 12 sessions of structural integration because they've heard it's cool. Mm-hmm. And so when you come in for your visit, based on the previous visit and what you tell me today, I kind of have an idea of which map I'm going to pull out, what the game plan is going to be for today. Now, let's just say you almost had a really bad car accident on your way to see me. So you're really, you're in a very stressed out state. Mm-hmm. You're not very grounded. And I have my treatment plan in mind, but you know what? It's not going to do any good as long as you're way up here. So, so there's two things that I do. The one thing I do is what I'm doing right now. I put my voice in this register, because we do know that slowing down the voice, making it more resonant in the chest, and there's a way to do it in the mouth as well, has a way, that vibration has a way of enacting the vagus nerve. And for those of you who don't believe that, the next time you're around a crying baby that's not yours, try it. Like you're in the coffee shop. Well, are any of us in coffee shops anymore? So when the pandemic is over, you can try this. But this was one of my superpowers for years. When I was in the coffee shop in my town, I would walk up to babies and calm them down, because I just looked them right in the eye, and I start talking to them like this, and they would just get really, really quiet and mellow. And it's because when the parents freaking out, they're in a hypercharged state, they can't do it, and they were grateful. I never had anybody give me stink eye for that. So I talked to them. I talk to my patient in my baby calm down voice, deliberately, not patronizingly, and I work on their neck and their suboccipital area, because that to me is the most immediate way that I can speak to the parasympathetic system and engage a positive vagal response. Because if I can, it doesn't matter where I engage that, because the vagus nerve goes to all of the associated organs and structures. So what's the one place I can talk to it? Up here in the suboccipitals. So I will do that first. Yeah. And then I'll carry on with my treatment plan. I'll kind of drop them down into a more parasympathetic state, and then we can get the work done. Because if I don't, then I'm going to be constantly, I'm going to say fighting, but I'm going to be having to deal with this baseline level of tension that wasn't there, wouldn't have been there if they hadn't just had that near miss on the road or whatever it might be. So that's as far as my working with the vagus nerve goes, and PolyFagot theory. Are you incorporating it at all? And how?
Well, for me, it was more like evidence to use your voice, because massage therapists, we use our hands, and we sometimes, I think, forget to use our voice. And also with your voice, you can do a lot of extra work. And I also studied hypnotherapy, so you also learn to work with trance. And
that's crazy. I studied hypnotherapy too.
Wow, cool.
That's another connection we have. Yeah. Yeah, the voice is really. But what I would say was, I think I always was aware I could use my voice that way, but I didn't make it a conscious decision until I became aware of PolyFagot theory and how that actually works.
Yeah. Well, I wrote a book, Mindfulness Massage, and we use massages for, we focus on themes from mindfulness, like trust And with trust, we massage a person in a fetal position. And I learned that if you use your voice, not even making words, but like soothing a baby, that gives a really deep impression with the clients.
I'll tell you something in a related area. Is something I just became aware of, where they put somebody in an fMRI, and they monitored what was going on in her brain while, and I shouldn't say her or him because it was a bunch of people. So in the experimental group, they monitored what was going on in the brain when they were receiving touch. And for me, the person giving the touch, there was two groups. One group had to focus on the touch. So how much pressure are they using? What's the texture of the skin? Is it dry? But they just had to repeatedly focus on the touch and the quality and what they felt and what it felt like. The other group had to listen to a series of audio pulses in a headphone, and that was where they were supposed to direct their attention, not to the touch. Mm-hmm. And they found that the person receiving the touch, it lit up different areas of the brain. Oh, wow. So even though the same areas were being touched, the same parts of the brain were not being stimulated.
Wow.
And and it's like I barely know what that means yet, but it does seem, but it does seem to indicate that what you focus on, the quality of your attention matters.
Yeah.
So what you say to the person that you're massaging or that you're treating matters. Why are you going to say, "Wow, this is the tightest trapezius I've ever seen"? Does that do me any good? Does that do them any good? Or if they want to, and I'm sure you see this too. The first few times you see somebody, they're probably more talkative because you're getting to know them and they're getting to know you, and that's fine. That's part of being comfortable. But after a while, I kind of want them to not be so talkative because it's distracting. It's really distracting from what we're doing. Yeah. And I don't think they're getting the best treatment possible. And part of that's why. I think, because for me personally, if I have somebody who I find mentally very stimulating, I have to tell myself, don't engage in conversation, because you'll be up here in your head in the conversation and your hands will be on automatic pilot. And maybe it's a pretty good automatic pilot, but it's not going to be your best.
No, doesn't have to focus the attention. Yeah.
Yeah. So where you focus your attention matters.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. I wanted to ask a question about interoception and proprioception.
Okay.
But I don't know. I just wrote down the words, and I want you to talk something about it.
Okay.
Well, here's the thing. I had a short interview with Dr. Slipe and Robert Slipe, and I also made a mistake. I said something which I thought was interoception, and it was, or proprioception, and it was interoception.
It's okay.
And later I heard him with another podcast, and he said, well, if a massage therapist does no difference, he should go back to school.
Don't take that too personally. Okay. If you think of the mistake, I probably made it somewhere down the line. And probably because I was just really excited at the time. And there's hysteresis is another one of those. Every time I see the word hysteresis, I have to go look it up because I can't remember what it means. And don't ask, okay? Because I don't remember right now. And then when I look at it, I'm like, oh, that's what it means. It doesn't sound like that's what it means. So the easy way to think about interoception and proprioception. So right now I'm talking to Stefan, and I've got my coffee mug here that has a sealable lid that helps keep everything nice and warm. But I'm trying to get the lid off. Now, I don't have to look at it while I'm looking at Stefan. I can just feel with my fingers and pry that lid off, because there's a little bit of chai in there, but I can't get it out with the lid on. And I just raised it to my lips and I took a sip. And if I'd been thinking, I would have done it with my eyes shut, and I'm going to take a second sip here if you're watching on video. So my eyes are closed, nothing up my sleeve. And I've got the cup in my hand.
Amazing.
And I can take a sip with my eyes closed because I can feel the experience of my own body and manipulating my body in its environment.
Yeah.
Okay. If I crossed my leg while I was talking to you for the next half hour and then got up off the chair when we were done and my calf had gone to sleep, I would put my foot in the ground and my proprioception would be crazy and I might fall over because I would have impaired my own proprioception by cutting off circulation to my leg. So that's why I don't know how it is in, you're in Denmark, right?
Holland.
Holland, sorry, my bad. So yes, Dutch, my bad. You're in Holland. So before they had breathalyzers and when you were suspected of driving drunk and they would pull you over, they would ask you to touch your finger to your nose or get out in the street and walk on the line down the center of the street in a straight line because alcohol impairs your proprioception. It was a weird experience, but I got my second dose of the Moderna vaccine last week. So haven't grown any extra body parts yet, so I'm happy about that. But I got my second dose and I felt great till the next morning. And I was in the kitchen thinking I can go to work, but I felt like I was drunk. But my brain didn't. But my body was just off. Wow. And my brain is functioning normally and saying, do this, do that, put this here. But it's like I go to put the cup down and I wouldn't I better be careful that I don't miss the counter and break the glass. I think I'm just going to go sit down for a little while. Maybe I shouldn't be driving. It's like my physical perceptions were off from my mental processes. So that's when proprioception isn't working. So interoception is internal. And that's something we're still mapping out. I'm sure the vagus nerve is involved in this somehow. But interoception involves how we feel on the inside. So if I take a moment right now, I can feel that my left deltoid, maybe it's a little trigger pointy. I'm not sure what. My voice is getting a little hoarse because I've done a number of interviews today, and this is the last one. So I'm consciously making my voice a little breathier because it's getting a little tired. And my butt is a little stiff. I should wiggle it around a little bit. And my stomach is full because I just had lunch before we got on this call. So those are more the things of interoception.
Great.
And what they're finding, and why this is sometimes relevant to us, is what they're finding, and it's chicken or egg, we don't know why, but people who have certain conditions, let's pick anorexia. So there's a component to anorexia that is interoceptive in nature. If you give an anorexic person a pen and a piece of paper and ask them to draw a picture of themselves, they will often draw a fat person. Because their perception is that way. And I've worked with some people who've had stomach staple surgery, people who've lost, on the order of 150, 200 pounds, 100 or so kilos. And their perception is that they are still that heavy, even though they're not. And it's like it takes the brain longer to catch up to the changes of the body. So there's a lot of weirdness there. So is that clear now?
Totally. Thank you very much. But you were also saying something about with your eyes closed, taking a sip. And I was thinking about that ape again. I thought he probably wouldn't be able to do that, but I'm not sure. And maybe that's the difference between with the gray matter and the more evolved human.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if they've let's blindfold a monkey and give him a banana and see what he does.
I'll look into that. Okay.
Yeah, let's get some blindfolded monkey studies going.
So maybe last question. It's nice to hear, because I also interviewed Robert Slijp, and he also became a researcher after being a body worker. And you sound like you also you're really more of a researcher now than a body worker or therapist.
Well, that's nice that you think so. Not yet. Okay. So do you have a private practice, Stefan?
I'm a teacher now.
Okay. So I had a private practice for years, and then I had a small little office with a few other people in it. And then I got the opportunity to join the department we call here integrative medicine, which has an MD running the shots and a psychiatrist, but also has someone like me, massage therapy, chiropractic, acupuncture, yoga, biofeedback, all of those kinds of mind body things, but working in a medical environment. And I thought, this is where I want to be. So I was hoping to get more involved in the research end of things. And I was met with more resistance than I would have liked. And I don't take that personally. And so I'm hoping to actually start doing some research, but I haven't really done any independent research on my own. I was fortunate enough to, when I was working for and with Tom Myers and in the anatomy trains school, met Robert Slijp. And Robert was very encouraging to me of the more science. I don't know. I don't remember too much about myself then. I was just trying to be quiet just enough to not get kicked out of the room, because I knew how much I still didn't know. But Robert liked the questions that I asked. So he encouraged me to come to Germany to take part in this Fascia summer school. And it was the last thing at the time that I could afford, but I did it anyway. And then he asked me to come back. He said, hey, you're handy with a video camera. Do you think you can videotape these presentations so that we have them to watch again later? And I said, sure. And then I started editing them and putting the slides in the right place. So I had to listen to these people to know where to put the slides in, and things like that. So I sort of had a bootstrap science education. I always liked science, but I had a bootstrap education in fascia science, because I kept going to Germany once a year or so to work with Robert and with those people, and hearing these things over and over and editing these videos. So and plus I was working in the medical environment. So I figured the more I could speak in that language, the more effective I could be in the medical environment of finding other people to maybe do some fun research with. So I'm flattered that you think I've done some original research. I have some really interesting ideas. So if you're out there and you're listening, email me. It'll be in the show notes. But involving EEGs, involving purple EEGs. And that's all I'm going to say at this point. So I'm hoping that somewhere down the line, I will have my name on a research paper or two, just because it would be a cool thing to do. And I'd like to do some research that moves the ball forward, and gets us closer to the kind of medical acceptance that we need. And I think medicine is finally willing to listen. We had an opioid crisis in this country. I don't know if that affected Holland at all or not.
The opioid crisis?
Yes.
No, but I've seen it. Yes.
Yes. So it was a type of painkiller for musculoskeletal pain that absolutely got people addicted.
Yeah.
And it was overprescribed, and it was a very, very, very bad situation. And so medicine is looking now for alternatives, particularly for pain. And that's where people like you and people like me can really make a difference. What we have to do is we need to up our game a little bit, and be able to articulate our thought processes about what we do and how it works.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, because like, believe me, the people that I work with, the connection network I've made in the hospital, I have this surgeon, that physiatrist, and so on and so forth. They don't know the things that I know, but they respect that I know things that they don't know that are useful, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So, it's not about convincing them about what you know. It's about being comfortable with your knowledge and being able to communicate it effectively. And that's something we could, all get better at doing. We need to quit talking about lactic acid. And I could go on about things like that. I'm not going to bring up crystals if I'm talking to a surgeon. I don't know that I want to bring that up to anyone, but I mean, but yet the nice thing about integrative medicine is you can talk about some of the softer things. So some of these integrative medicine conferences, I can have a talk with a doctor about the soul. And it's okay. It's like you can bring those emotional and spiritual parts into the room with you. I had a amazing talk with somebody at one of these conferences about, of all things, feng shui, which was one of those things that when I heard it used to make me go, yeah, because it was just, there was a time where it was everywhere, you're in a bad relationship. Well, you need to put a mirror at 45, all that kind of stuff. So, but they were asking me how I kept centered and grounded in my practice room. And how I dealt with like people's energy, their moods, And I thought about it and I said, wow, I do it with art. I've got this thing on the wall. I've got that thing over there. I have this little cup over here, and that cup means this to me. And it's not real obvious. It's not like in your face, but it's like, okay, I've set up my room that I treat in as a space that when I walk in, it does that for me. And hey, there are people who test my feng shui. Let me tell you, we all have those, and that's fine. But that's one of the ways. That's one of the ways that I do that. And in these integrative medicine circles, you can talk about those things that are beyond the science, but make a difference. And they don't think you're a woo-woo person, as we say here.
Well, that's quite good progress.
Yeah.
Good progress. Hey, my final question, if I may.
Sure.
What makes a good therapist?
Someone who listens with their ears and with their hands. And I'll share with you the question I ask everybody the first time they come into my office. I have my forms, I have my questions, I want to know their story. And I can't tell you, maybe we're 20 minutes into that first visit, and I'm thinking, I got about 30 minutes left, and then this person has to leave. But I let them talk, and people say, you sat and listened. Thank you for listening. I hear that so often. So listen, ask thoughtful questions. Don't be in a hurry to get to the treatment. And, you might spend a half of that first visit listening to the person. But by the time you do the treatment, even though, it wasn't maybe as thorough as you liked it to be, you're going to have a better treatment, and they're likely to get more out of it, because a lot of the people that I see that are having chronic pain problems or have tried this thing, that thing, and the other thing that haven't worked, they feel like nobody is hearing them anymore.
Wow.
And I'll say to them, and they'll say, does that make sense? And I'll say, well, it makes sense to you. Okay. So it's real. It's real to you. It's my job to figure out how to make sense of it in your body in a way that helps things change for the better. Okay. So yes, maybe I can't explain it any differently than you can, but if it makes sense to you, we're going to figure this out together. And that's what I think makes a good therapist is kind of like a cross between a best friend and a detective. By that, I mean, you can trust your best friend. They can, people almost feel shy sometimes to complain about what's bothering them because they don't want to be judged as being a whiner or this or that. I don't judge people. So that kind of best friend aspect, and being a detective, like trying to figure out, well, how does this piece, that piece, and the other piece fit together in this pattern? Do they fit together? If I change this one piece here and have them get up and move their shoulder, or put their feet on the ground, do a side bend, how does it change? how does that give me information? So it's, my practice is very different in terms of interactivity and getting people up and down from the table than, say, the type of massage therapy I was first taught 30 years ago. It's very different.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, I think we should leave it with that.
Okay, I'm good with that, Stefan. If you are, this was really great.
I had a great time. Thank you very much.
I did too. You're welcome.
We talked about all the important stuff. We talked even about monkeys. So.
Well, now I got to look up that gray matter, white matter thing. I got to check that out.
Yeah, I'll dive into it again and I'll mail you.
Yeah. If you have any links, send me.